because the mail couldn't run out of Memphis.
You ever go on iDrive Arkansas? You can look at the cameras on the interstates. You can get on those cameras. Me and Sean was sitting there during that snow going, yep, there's one, he's in the ditch, there's blue lights. You know, and it's mostly on the interstate, and there's one at Mammoth Springs, state line on the bridge. You know, you can see blue lights and cars, and you know, and it's real time traffic.
Oh, that's
I wish there was some closer.
Is it capital letters or just put them in? It does it.
Okay.
But you can see what's on the roads, you know, it'll give you as like a map and tell you like the snow on it and whatever.
Go around Arkansas?
Mm-hmm. I drive Arkansas.
Oh, I drive.
I drive. And it shows you accidents and just whatever you need to kind of know.
Okay.
When you click on that one,
You don't know that, or he'd be looking at it.
Okay.
and see like when it was snow, this was all blue, and then it shows you like closures.
Okay. Ooh. All right. I got everything up and going now finally. So where's my pencil? All right. Turn this off. Hello. I can't hear you yet. Hang on a second. Sometimes it gives me an option to ask you to unmute yourself, but it's not at the moment. Okay, now it says that your Galaxy is, now you're muted. So now I'll ask you to unmute. Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
No? Okay, it says you're talking, but I still don't hear you. Wait, hang on. Ha, 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 ha. I'm having to use Dale's computer. Hang on. There. There we go. All right, here, Lyra, come say hi.
Hi, Lyra. How are you?
Good.
Okay.
We look like the same sweet Lyra.
Yeah, she's just getting a lot taller. All right. So, sorry, we had some technical difficulties and Zoom and I are about to go round and round, but that's okay. We're here and we're ready for study. So, and it's recording and it's all good. Okay. So, all right, for our prayer request, we of course have Susan's family. I'm trying to think what else is going on that I'm going blank on. No, I'm trying to think. Dana Matthews has her surgery coming up. Let's see here. I can't think of anything else at the moment. So if we don't have anything else to add, we'll start. All right, so we'll start with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing us to come together and study your word. Thank you so much for these ladies who have a desire to study your word and to know what your word says and to learn how to apply it in their lives. Be with us as we go throughout this study. I pray that we have open minds and open hearts so that we will be able to dive into your word and to see what you would have us to see and to learn your message for us. Help us as we leave here to take what we have studied and shine that light into all the rest of the world. Help us to take that message and make proper changes in our lives so that we can always be growing closer to you. Right now, Father, I do come to you with a heavy heart in the loss of Susan. I know that she has earned her reward, but it sure is difficult, Father, to face this loss. And I know you understand what it is like to suffer loss. And I pray that you will help comfort us and help us to comfort each other. Be with Susan's family and help us to shine your light to them. Help us to extend our love to them. Because, Father, this was so unexpected, and I know they're struggling. Father, right now I want to pray that you be with Dana Matthews and her upcoming surgery. I pray that you will be with those providing her care so that all may go well, and help us to be able to reach out to her afterwards to encourage her to return to the assembly so that her spiritual body may be strengthened just like her physical body. I pray that you be with those of the lost right now and help them to have a softened heart with a desire to seek your will and to understand your truth. And help all of us who are Christians be open to all the opportunities to see people who are desperate for your word, and help us to be ready and willing with evangelistic hearts to reach out and spread the gospel. I pray all these things in your Son's name. Amen. Okay, so we are starting tonight in chapter 5, number 6. So we're talking about the fundamental family command, honor thy father and mother. And question 6 was a little interesting. It said, some readers may remember a heat wave of epic proportions passed through Europe in 2003. In the country of France alone that summer, there were over 14,000 deaths, most of which were among the elderly. One of the largest contributing factors was that the younger generations, who were still capable of travel, were away on holiday escaping the heat. Many bodies were not claimed for weeks because family members were away. Undertakers used a warehouse outside of Paris for the number of bodies because they did not have sufficient space in morgues. On September 3rd of that year, 57 unclaimed bodies were buried. All experts agreed that one of the reasons for the deaths and unclaimed bodies was a system in which respect for the elderly had drastically declined in recent decades. New laws were passed to ensure that adult children are legally responsible for aged parents. There are many web resources with commentary about this event in 2003. A Google search will give you more details. This is occurring in the home countries of women who are involved in our study. Is this occurring in the home countries of the women who are already involved in our study? So, are the governments in the United States, in Arkansas, and in Oklahoma having to step up and make laws that will make adult children be responsible for their elderly parents? So, what were you able to find anything?
I don't know that.
This one was, I really had to do, I did a lot of digging and I had to ask how to find this question because I was struggling with it.
I just wrote law.
In the state of Arkansas, there are 30 states that have what are called filial laws that are in place that require adult children to have some type of responsibility in their care of their parents. Arkansas's law is really interesting. it only applies to mental health care. So in the state of Arkansas, you are only required to help pay for your parents' care if it's for mental health services. So you aren't required to pay for the hospital visits, you aren't required to pay for their nursing home care, but if they have a mental health issue, you are required to help pay for that. Shirley, did Oklahoma have any? I don't remember seeing that on the list.
You know what? I did not get half these questions. I'm sorry. I thought I was prepared.
That's okay.
But I didn't pick this up. No.
Well, this one was a lot harder. And what was really interesting is when you look at these states that have these laws, most of them have some exemptions that allow you to get out of it. Like if you were ever abandoned by your parent, then you were often considered not responsible for this. So if the parent abandons the child can in turn abandon their parent.
Why is mental health the only one picked out?
In Arkansas, I don't know. In other states, like in Pennsylvania, it's total care. In fact, there is still a case going on where a man is being sued by the state of Pennsylvania because his mother had like a $90,000 nursing home bill before she moved to Italy or something. She moved way away. And the state put him on the hook for it and is expecting him to pay. And so they sued him. And well, the nursing home did, and the state agreed. And so there's been some appeals and everything. And so in some states, you really are totally responsible. In other states, I mean, again, 20 states plus, you count the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico within our legislative issues. So I don't know which all qualify, but at least 20 other states and possible other provinces don't have any laws whatsoever holding a child responsible for the care of their adult parent.
I mean, I don't know.
Adult children.
Well, no, she means like for the parent.
The reason I don't agree with it is it's one more thing the state needs to stay out of. But they're forcing people to pay large medical bills or whatever for their parents.
Not everybody
And
has
so,
that money.
well, that's true, but then you got people that can be like, well, Mom, you don't really need heart surgery because I can't afford it. I mean, it's just one more layer there that you force somebody to do something and things usually go bad.
Well, and
Especially when the state is telling you, forcing you things, usually go bad.
and agreed. So when the state gets involved, there are often issues. There are many things. I've had this conversation over the past year or so with my mom about legislating morality. And we can't legislate morality. We have to teach morality. And then people have to react and respond to what they're taught. However, this is going to sound terrible, and just know that this is not how I feel, but this is the culture. Okay, this is what I see within the culture. Our culture has parents taught their children the world revolves around their children. Okay, so this is what we've taught. This is what we did. Oh, you showed up, you get a prize. Oh, you're so special, you get everything you ever wanted. Oh, let me give up everything in my life. Let me do this, let me do that. So you can have absolutely everything you ever wanted, way surpassed everything you ever needed. Let's revolve it around you. And it has only continued to get worse. I've talked about this snowflake generation that I belong to. Everybody blames the snowflakes. I'm sorry, it's not my fault. It's not our fault that we have these ideas. It's our parents' fault. And when you add that in, you have to also add in the grandparents who allowed some of the cycle. My best friend in high school well, from 4th grade through high school, was raised by her grandparents. And her grandparents, Glenn Colley, the DVD that goes with this lesson, he talks about how grandparents cannot raise their grandchildren the same way as parents because that's your grandbaby. You treat them differently. You have a very different relationship with them. You don't discipline them the same way. And so it becomes very different. So we have this generation who did so poorly raising their kids that they had to raise their grandkids. And to be perfectly honest, many of them have done so poorly with that generation, they're raising their great grandkids. And so we have this whole issue where we have failed to teach this fact that we are supposed to honor and respect our elders. We have failed to reteach honor and respect, period, which as we continue to go more into this study, we discuss this responsibility issue. And so we have these parents who wonder why their children aren't doing anything to help them, because you taught them they didn't have to. You taught them it was okay
And that's
to
where
be
the state
selfish.
comes in play, because everybody wants their money and they ain't gonna get no money until they start suing and making law.
Well, and that's the thing. So these nursing homes, when you look at where funding comes from, it's through Medicare and private insurance sources and things like this. And then they seize so much, they'll start seizing property. And so there's all these different things. And so because of that, the state is having to make laws that say, hey, you've got to take care of your parents. And again, and the kids still are like, I disagree with this fact. And again, there are so many different rules, different laws as to, and again, why mental health care in Arkansas, my best guess is because mental health care is taboo. We don't talk about mental health. You can't have a nervous breakdown. You can't have any type of mental health issue. It's ugly and nobody wants to talk about it. And so when nobody wants to talk about dementia, nobody wants to talk about dementia. So we don't talk about these things. And so because of this, it's an even more difficult thing to address. So that's my best guess as to why Arkansas only focuses on the mental health aspect of things. What's this?
How many questions
I don't know yet.
are there?
So that was just some really interesting things about those. And actually, I pulled up this website as I went to Google this real quick. And actually, this is for 2021. I have no earthly idea what year I was looking at previously that had the 30. But this one for 2021 says currently 27 states and Puerto Rico have specific laws surrounding filial responsibility. So it sounds like some states might have dropped their laws. So not really sure on that.
Maybe they weren't following enough, or the kids that didn't want to do it came in office and like,
Well, oftentimes if a law is not being kept and followed and different things like that, they'll strike it from the book because, there's no reason to be dealing with it.
Too many loopholes.
Yes.
Everybody's got a different situation. They can't make decisions.
Yes. Okay. So, here's the next question in this. How does this commandment impact our decisions about the placement of our elderly in care facilities? What responsibilities do adult Christians have to aged parents? We're still on question 6. We didn't go over all of this, sis. It's okay.
Well, Christian children should definitely take care of their parents. They should meet their needs to the ultimate that they're able to. This summer, I heard so many complaints and just so much sympathy for these people in nursing homes because they couldn't have visitors. My thought was, why don't you take them out of that home during this time? If you're able to, if they're able to live outside that nursing home, then take them home.
Mhm.
I got on a soapbox about that. I was so upset because whining about looking through a glass, and I just couldn't stand that.
Stop whining about it. Do something.
Yes. Yeah. Quit complaining and do something. Yes. Any other thoughts on this?
Well, you take care of them as far as you can, but
Some
in this day and age, most of them single household, single parent, they can't do it. Even with two parents, they're working, and the parent needs more care, they can't do it.
So there are definitely some interesting things to consider here. What, Lyra?
to go with what we shared.
Yes, Shirley, you'll spit it out in a second. You got that cough drop in, you can't talk.
Christians are supposed to go above and beyond.
Christians are supposed to go above and beyond. I will totally admit, I'm very fortunate. I have training. There is not a single thing that any elderly in our family could need for routine care that I would not be able to provide, aside from equipment, if I needed like a bariatric lift or something like that.
Yeah, you could provide the health care for them,
Mhm.
but could you do that and take care of your family the way they need to take care of at the same time?
It's kind it is complicated. And I see it. There was actually when we started preaching school, we started January of 2016. I started homeschooling the kids at that point. Prior to that, my grandparents lived at home. They still got around fairly well. Grandpa had COPD. Granny had Parkinson's. At that point, she wasn't getting around a whole lot, but she could. She could still go to worship services and stuff, but it was difficult. In May, Grandpa died. And I spent 3 weeks, I think it was, 3 hours away from my husband, taking my wives' classes online for preaching school, taking care of Granny's needs, beginning to homeschool the kids. And I really didn't have a clue. I was still figuring everything out with that. I spent a lot of time back and forth. What I can tell you, depending on, first off, I don't believe what our education system pushes are the most important things to learn. So in saying that, I am always more concerned about the big picture that I'm teaching my kids. Do I think it's important they learn how to do math and read and write and do? Yes, that's very important. These are all skills that God expects us to develop so that we can evangelize the world.
We use our Bible in our school. That's one of our subjects.
Yes, but one of the things that my kids learned at that point was compassion, and they learned how to help take care of my kids. Lyra was 5, Garrett would have been 8, shifting into 9. And they learned a lot about how to help take care of elderly. Yes, Lyra. That was beforehand, though.
Yeah, but you're the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
I am not as much as the exception as you think. There are a lot more out there who are developing this mindset. I see it in my Facebook groups.
Well, it's just every day, like around here, they get up, they're at work at 6:30 at the factory.
Yes.
Home,
Yes.
and it just doesn't work. Unfortunately, in our society, if they want their lights on, that's what they have to do.
In a lot of respects, yes. I do understand that there are definitely times when it is a requirement for both people to work. There are also plenty of times when what we have is a standard of living issue. Okay. Everybody thinks they have to have this. They have to have that. These aren't requirements. Can I live without internet in my house? Yes. I could go to the free library and use the internet. Okay. They think they have to have these lovely smartphone devices. This is not a necessity in life. It's a luxury. The problem is we have taught ourselves that we have to have these things. Now mind you, there is a class of people who always struggle, and there always has been. But so much of the middle class that I see, well, mom works to pay for the pool. Mom works to pay for every single extracurricular travel, ball, this and that, and all these extra things that they think are necessities in their life. We have to take a $10,000 vacation every year, you know. My brother has a family of 6. And so when they go on vacation, it's not little vacations, you know. I mean, like, he took a family of 6 on a cruise. So, I mean, this is what they think they have to have. The problem is we don't have to have those things, but the society, it has taught, again, part of this culture that has come in.
Yeah, and a lot of it now, like even Randy, he's a laborer, right? Well, he has to have a computer and he has to have a smartphone because that's how he does his resumes to get the job.
Yes.
That's how his bosses communicate.
Yes.
And I can't live without mine because that's how I communicate with him. But, even, when he worked on the slope, had flip phone. We had to go buy him a smartphone because they did all these plane tickets on the phone, and that little flip phone wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So now it's just become where it's just more.
Yes.
More, you have to have it to actually make a living.
And there are some jobs, yes, where
Doctors, nurses, they have to have it.
they do. I can remember my mom is a nurse practitioner. Her job at the time, she was on call 24/7. She was the healthcare provider for a nursing home. We had a bag phone. We had the first series bag phone because she would have to call. She had a pager. Like, mind you, we're from rural, like we're rural, like this rural. Okay. These were all things that were like huge technology jumps in our homes, in our community. But she had to have it to do her job. And so there are definitely, but of course, there are times like the pager was, for a long time, was provided by work. And then things shifted and she provided her own with certain benefits. And some of the phone things were provided through work. I know when I worked hospice, they provided me with, but you're right. There are times like to get that resume up, and it can be hard, but again, and I'm not advocating this for everybody and I'm not condemning, but the public library is good for those things. It's an absolutely underutilized resource. And in fact, a lot of public libraries have a librarian who can help you with those things, who can help you navigate the systems and create your resume. It breaks my heart. It's my favorite place in the world.
When you was in school, you had to write a paper.
Yes.
You went to the library to get your resources. Now they just pull out their phone. The library is almost the thing of the past.
There are definitely people that the library is an underutilized resource. But there are things that we don't need, that we tell ourselves we do need, we have to have. And if we were willing to go without, then we wouldn't have to give up some of those things that we choose to give up. There are many things that if I worked, there are many things that I wouldn't worry about, I wouldn't stress about. I could have all kinds of things.
But then I wouldn't be able to take grandpa to his doctor.
Well, and
be with mom, or
yeah,
take Sean to the doctor.
Exactly. I couldn't.
Kind of
If I wanted those physical luxuries, I could not homeschool my kids. And to me, that is way more important than the physical luxuries.
you're
And
talking
if
about
you
that.
tell me to hurry up one more time, I will bust you for dishonoring me. Is that clear? Yes, you are. Yes, I know what that means. Stop arguing. So it does become an issue. When you are capable, we definitely need to be helping our parents. The other thing becomes is because of modern medicine, people are living longer. The longer people live, the more healthcare issues they have, which makes it more difficult to deal with things at home. So it can definitely be an issue. I personally, assisted living, it's like Miss Shirley was saying, assisted living facilities, most technically to fit into an assisted living facility, really and truly, most people could do that. Most adult kids, even if both work 2 jobs, could do that for their parents. They wouldn't need to be in an assisted living facility. They could be at home, but it's inconvenient. It is harder. And I feel this is a subject I feel very strongly about taking care of our elderly, because I can tell you as a nurse, I haven't even worked nursing homes. I have worked hospice, so I've gone into nursing homes and I've gone into assisted living facilities. But even just what I see at the bedside, elderly people being admitted to the hospital and nobody ever checks on them. Nobody. They're in the hospital and their kids don't care. Their grandkids don't care. They do. And I got to tell you, like, that's one thing that we have dropped everything that we have been doing on more than one occasion and driven 3+ hours away to deal with these things. Well, yes, that wasn't a necessity though the other day. That was, but I mean, there are things that we should be doing that we don't.
Well, but nobody teaches their kids that. Oh, that's just grandma. She's gonna give you $5 to one.
Yes.
That's pretty much what grandmas are good for.
Yes. It's that grandmas are good for spoiling, but that's the other, that's the other issue that we have. Grandparents have flat out neglected their biblical responsibility. When you look in the book of Deuteronomy, the parents were supposed to teach and grandparents were supposed to teach their children about obeying God's laws and about what God does for us. And to be honest, I can't tell you the number of grandparents who I see who, even within the church, there is no spiritual aspect to their grandparenting. None. And I'm like, you are neglecting your duties that God has commanded you to do. And so you're right. Grandparents are only good for, when we can get something out of them. Yes. Yes, turn off the fans. So, there are these issues that we have because, again, this goes back to how we have chosen to raise our children. And because they have because those above us have chosen not to instill these ideas and not to, and they have not continued to do their responsibilities, their biblical responsibilities, that has now caused a problem for them. And that's how this works. Unfortunately, we will all reap what we sow. And when we neglect to sow to our children that our elderly are important, that the world does not revolve around them, when it comes time to needing help from your adult children, if you haven't taught these things, they're not going to be there. So, and this is where we have a generation who is opening their eyes, and really and truly, more and more people are stepping up. Not as many as I want there to be, but the church is definitely seeing this. Well, I mean, let's face it, as we studied the Israelites all the way through, I mean, it took them 40 days to completely forget about Jehovah, who had brought them out of Egypt. And yes. So that man is just, this has always been an issue. It has been. And that's just where we have to make conscious decisions to change and move forward. And choose to do things differently. And I can tell you, It can be done, because my mom and I have had many conversations back and forth, and my mom is, what you see here is not how I was raised. And my mom have had many discussions. And even though I was raised in the church, I have even talked to my mom about the fact that she did a terrible job raising us in the church. We weren't raised scripturally like we should have been.
I think I've been going here 3 years. Yeah, 3 years ago, something like that. First time I'd stepped foot in the church since I was 5 years old.
And, you know,
I wasn't raised in the church. I didn't raise my kids in the church.
and so there are things that we have to do to change, and it can be done. And as
Yeah,
I
it's
have,
not easy
it's
sometimes.
not, but I can tell you with these conversations I've had with my mom, I have watched a spiritual change come over her, because the younger, Dale's sermon on Sunday about influence. Don't let people despise you for your youth. Set the example. And I can tell you, there are a lot of the younger generations who are stepping up, and they are setting this example for their parents, and for grandparents and things like this. So it can be done. But when you're starting at ground zero and building back up, it just takes a long time to get there.
It took a while to get down. It'll take a while to get back there.
This is true. All right, number
Gina,
7. Yes.
you made amazing strides in spite of your raising.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
But I said she's mixed sections in a row.
I'm just a
She's
little.
our spiritual leader.
Well, we're getting there. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Miss Shirley has known me literally my entire life. She was my 4th grade teacher, so she can tell some tales if you want to hear some.
Yes, I love her. So y'all be good to her.
All right, number 7. It says read Ephesians 6, 1 through 5, and copy here the repeated command that was originally given in Exodus 20. So what was the command?
Obey, honor your.
So obey and to honor your parents. Honor and obey.
I don't know
Okay.
why I have obey, dot, dot, dot on it.
Okay,
You really wanted to remember.
all right. So we can see again, it was given in the Old Testament. It's reiterated again in the New Testament. According to Deuteronomy 6, parents have the responsibility to teach their children these very statutes from Exodus 20. Give practical ideas and suggestions, resources that parents can use to put this honor in the hearts of their children. So, what kinds of things are you guys aware of? What kinds of things have maybe you done to help instill this idea of honoring parents and elderly?
Good, and 3 hour test to take care of me in progress.
Okay, so traveling 3 hours to take care of family, dropping everything and making the trip. Okay, what else? For my mom's birthday last month, Dale literally kicked me out of it. Lyra had the idea and Dale literally kicked me out of the house. I drove 7 hours one way to go see my mom for 12 hours to tell her happy birthday. You know,
That's great.
the kids and I went. So this is, you know, one of like, drop it, make the time, you know, do whatever. That was a very long weekend, but it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it to see, because I totally surprised her. She had no clue I was coming. So when we pulled in, it was really great.
Her face is so.
So other things.
I have no idea.
I guess I took this whole thing in a different direction or something, I'm not sure.
That's,
I've slept since I did this one.
I hear you.
Well, it's, after reading Deuteronomy 6, 6 through 9, my comment here is you have to believe it in your heart
Mhm.
and live it in front of your children first. Then teach and teach and teach and teach God's law and love to them.
That's true, because if you don't believe it, if you haven't stored it up in your heart, if you are not showing it by examples,
They see that.
there is a phrase, actions speak louder than words. And it's so true in anything. I can tell you to do something, but if I'm not willing to do it myself, you know, what are we going to gain? You're not going to get anything out of it. You're not going to listen to me. You're going to do what I'm doing. Parents, I hear parents say, do as I say, not as I do. You know,
Wouldn't that be nice?
when we have our bad habits, do as I say, don't do what I'm doing here. Ignore my bad habit.
What I say, not that I do.
So yes, we have to believe it. We have to live it. You know, for me growing up, that time with my grandparents was, now my mom was a single mom and she worked an 8 to 5 job. My granny was a school teacher and she retired when I was she retired in the end of 90, because we were living all the way in Richmond, Virginia from Kanawha, Oklahoma, which was 24 hours away for my mom to do her master's. And so my granny retired after the first 6 months or whatever that we were out there, so that 91, so that she would be able, so that Granny and Grandpa would be able to drop everything and come out to Virginia and help us, because I was 5, my brother was 10. When we moved back home, my mom works this job. Granny and Grandpa are retired. My grandparents literally were a second set of parents to me. There was none of this spoiled, rotten grandchild relationship. Absolutely not. My granny gave me way more switches than my mom ever did. I had my mouth washed out way more by my granny than my mom. Granny was the disciplinarian, but she was a very nurturing disciplinarian. But I always had this very close relationship with my grandparents because we had dinner together with them. Now, part of that was convenience for the sake of the fact that my mom worked. And so she couldn't have dinner ready at 5 o'clock. Whereas Granny, even when she was working as a school teacher, she could get off at 3, get some of her stuff done, and still have 5 o'clock dinner ready for my grandpa. But for us, that was just what it was. We were there all the time with Granny and Grandpa. When Grandpa died, I lost my dad, because that was my father figure. So we have all these, this time together. My kids spent a lot of time with their great grandparents because it's important that they spend time having those relationships. So I think that time together, we start by cultivating it by time. We show it's important. Cindy went in a very interesting, when you listen to her mini podcast, she covered these things, and she went in a different direction than I did, even in terms of practical things. She gave websites and resources that parents, especially with younger kids, could go to. Things like going to Apologetics Press and using their material to help with instilling. For her, it was all about instilling ideas young, instilling God's word in the kids young. And how do we do that? We do it by daily family Bible study. We do it by, she talked about when they would play Candyland and some other games, it was always done with Bible trivia. There were things, there are podcasts that you can have your kids listen to. There's a lot of different things. And so Cindy was going from a very practical application about what can we use to actually teach that age and older. I mean, because a lot of these resources have things for teenagers too. So that was kind of how Cindy went with it. What, Lyra?
Oh,
All right, any other thoughts or ideas? Well, I was really not prepared to have class up here at all, so I was just rushing. And then the computers, I was more worried about the computer. Okay. Number 8, there are 3 basic roles that parents must play to establish order and respect for authority in the home. I believe parents must feel a deep responsibility to be nurturers, educators, and disciplinarians. See if you can find passages for Israel and for us today that would validate the necessity of all 3 of these roles. She suggested using a concordance to look for words like teach, love, nurture, chasten, child, rod, and the list can go on. So what did you guys, what everybody find?
I got Deuteronomy 6, verse 7, and Deuteronomy 11, verse 19.
Okay, so for teachers, Lyra went to Deuteronomy. And let me just do this one here. Deuteronomy, the Deuteronomy 6, 7 should be the teach the statutes and commands when you
They're both
walk by the wayside, when you sit down to eat, when you lay down, when you rise up. Every which way but standing on your head, you should be teaching your children.
standing on your head.
Yes. I said every which way but stand. Like that's the only position. So there's sitting, there's standing, and there's lying down, right? So the only position left off is standing on your head. Okay. So that's what Deuteronomy 6 is. Deuteronomy 11, 19. You shall teach them to your children, talking of them when you are sitting in your house and when you are walking by the way and when you lie down and when you rise up. So it was repeated again. Okay, if the Bible says something once, it's clearly important. If the Bible says something twice, you really should listen.
If it says something 3 times, you really
Yeah.
need to
If anything is ever repeated in the Bible, you should definitely listen. What else do we have?
I wrote down scriptures, I didn't write notes as to what it said.
Well, that's okay. Which scriptures do you have?
Deuteronomy 32, 46.
Deuteronomy 32, 46. I don't have that anywhere, so let's see here.
And unto them set your hearts unto all the words which I testify among you this day, which you shall command your children to observe and do, all the words of this law.
Okay.
So you don't just, it's not just a part of what God said, you don't pick and choose. You teach all.
All of it. Yes. Yes. That's another thing parents are very guilty of. They only teach the parts that are fitting for their lifestyles, their choices. Okay. I gotta tell you, as I was reading this, it was almost a little difficult. You go through the book of Proverbs, and that is the parenting book. And so almost everything in Proverbs to me fell underneath the educator realm, but there was Proverbs 8, Proverbs 2, 1 through 2, Proverbs 3, 1, Proverbs 5, 7, Proverbs 6, 20. All of these are about teaching your children and the importance of it. What is it? Let's see here.
You could have looked up
Oh, and that's where it does. It gets kind of interesting depending on which. So what about, actually, some of those Proverbs might have been the discipline. Oh, there's disciplinarians. Proverbs was another one. It's filled with disciplinarian things about, you have to discipline your children. You discipline because you love them, and ways to discipline your children. When we look at Ephesians, we can get a good idea of modern day parenting. Well, parenting rules that we are in our new covenant. So Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. So we have to teach them so that there's the instruction, there's the discipline. And oddly enough, when I was looking words up, when it talks about this discipline, the word used actually is to train the entire mind and body. So the parents, the fathers specifically, but the parents are told that they are to train every aspect. They are to teach every aspect to their children. It's their job. And I did not know that before I got into this study. I had never seen the Greek word for that one.
And this is specifically Ephesians 6:4.
Mhm. So in Ephesians 6:4, where it talks about bringing the children up in the discipline and the instruction, I will get Blue Letter Bible up here so I can give you the word. That word discipline there is talking about the entire thing. It's okay.
That part, I didn't get the entire.
So it's, I'll get you the thing here. The whole training and education of a child, which relates to the cultivation of mind and morals, and employs for this purpose, now commands and admonishes, now reproof and punishment. It also includes the training and care of the body. So when it's talking about this discipline, it really is every aspect of teaching a child. It's the parent's job to be responsible for that. Yes, and we will get into that because I have a really, there's a question about spanking, and I got that one for you. Are you going to give us some stuff? There's not room, baby. There really isn't. Mm-mm. What do you want? What are you propping up here for, baby? No. Okay. So that one was about nurturing, but that was also about education, and that one was that's also about discipline. 2 Timothy 1:5 is another one that talks about teaching. 2 Timothy 1:5. It talks about this. I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now dwells in you. So Timothy was taught, and the word of God was nurtured in Timothy from a young age. Titus 2:3-5 talks about teaching. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and their children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. So that's another thing where we have this love and education aspect brought out. In terms of discipline, Hebrews 12. Verse 6-11. We start out quoting the Old Testament. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are not without discipline, if you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. So discipline is a requirement. Today, parents don't discipline their children, period. And I don't mean even just spanking. I mean, like, there is no discipline. And so because there's no discipline, you read these verses and it's like, the Bible says if you don't discipline your child, you don't love them, because you're setting them up for failure when you fail to discipline them, because they will be disciplined at some point in their job, by the authorities, even something as simple as a speeding ticket, that's discipline. These are all things. And if when the parents refuse to teach this to their children, they don't love them, because they don't care about what's going to happen to them later. And I have many, many, many other verses, but I won't go into all of them. Are there any other verses you guys have that you want to include?
Well, I found something interesting, and this is kind of off the subject, but yet, to me, I can connect it.
Okay.
Let's see. It's on this page, this chart. that you
Uh-huh.
handed out at the
Yes.
beginning. And in the lines for honor your father and your mother, and it gives Matthew 19, Mark 10, Luke 18. And these specific verses quoted here it's where Jesus is quoting the Ten Commandments,
Uh-huh.
these particular verses. But I found that in Matthew 19, Mark 10, and Luke 18, the writers also recorded the account of where the parents were bringing the children to Jesus, and the disciples stepped in and said, "No, go away.
Mhm.
Don't bother him, go away." And Jesus said, "No, let the little children come to me."
Mhm.
And I just found that it kind of struck me as odd that those particular accounts are listed right along in those same chapters
Mhm.
with those where he did honor your father.
As a parent, there is nothing greater I can do to my children than bring them to Jesus. And for the parents who physically could do that and have Jesus lay his hands on them and pray for them and bless them, that would have been just amazing. Dale grew up denominational, and his mom always, she had this, she told me one time, it was her job to introduce her children to Jesus. So she would take them to the church building and drop them off for Bible class and come home. And I was like, well,
Better than nothing.
I was like, well, okay. But I was just like, but that's not how you introduce yours. Like, that's not what that means. It's so much deeper. You have to bring them into this. You have to train up this relationship. Because as we looked at in Hebrews, God disciplines the ones that he loves. And I can tell you, Dale and I have been under the discipline of God and have been humbled greatly by God. It would have been a lot better in our lives if we could have totally avoided God's discipline, because it was very painful. 10 years later, and it's still painful, but we have grown from it. We can look back upon that discipline and be grateful for that discipline, because it changed everything about our lives. And Dale, I talked to somebody one time, and they were talking about all these things that they had done, and it was like, well, I never got in trouble for that. And it was really interesting. And when I came across this verse about God disciplines those they love, it's like, you didn't get in trouble because God doesn't love you, apparently. It was just like, as you try to wrap your brain around some of these things. But on the other hand, God does discipline those that he loves. But I can tell you this, I watched growing up my brother be subjected to God's discipline, and I watched my mom and my grandparents subvert God's discipline. I watched them do everything they could to undermine that discipline that God was doling out to my brother. My brother is an atheist and has no desire to even attempt to know God, because they did not allow him to be disciplined.
Well, yeah, but I'm sure they did the best they could. That's just a parent stepping in trying to shield their child. Even in the greater scheme of things, it may not have been the best thing, but in the moment, you're just you try to protect that child.
I can understand that, but I can tell you after watching that, it completely changed my view of how to do things with my children.
This is just me, I'm a little weird. I'm weird. Do you, in the way I think things, like in my
Mhm.
past, I look back at, do you think that happened to him and to them to teach you?
There were definitely things I could learn from it, yes. And that's the other thing. Romans
No, what
8,
I mean is,
yeah.
I think sometimes he does stuff for like you to see or experience from an outer look, for you to learn, not necessarily for people in that situation, but for somebody that's close and looking in to learn and say, hey, wait a minute. And I don't know if that makes sense to y'all.
It does. And there are definitely times where things do happen to others for us to learn. My brother had a bad habit of drinking and driving, and they got him out of lots of legal issues because of that. They never forced him to deal with his alcohol issues as a minor. They got him out of it. Okay. From a Christian perspective, that is one thing. My grandpa was an elder in the church. He was a preacher. He was a Bible class teacher. I hold my grandfather in very high esteem. But when I look back at what he did in terms of how my brother's situation was handled, my opinion of my grandfather dropped significantly. Because with somebody with his biblical knowledge, he should have known that God's discipline needed to happen to help my brother.
So you know that now.
I
You
knew
know
that
then, did you?
I did. I was a very smart mouth, self-righteous little brat. I'm not gonna lie. My greatest sin was self-righteousness. And it still is at some points. God humbles me all the
I always
time.
think maybe something happens to teach someone else a lesson, not necessarily the people in the situation, but somebody else looking in going,
Well,
you know.
Let me
I'm a little,
jump down real quick to question 9, and I'm going to answer your question as we look at question 9, because question 9 talks about the prodigal son account, and it talks about some of the attributes of the Father, which is God, as we are displayed in this prodigal son account. Growing up, when I watched my brother do these behaviors, I can remember telling my mom at 13, 14 years old, this is your house. You pay the bills. Why do you let him come home drunk? Kick him out. Don't let him disrupt your home. I'm suffering from this. You're suffering from this. Don't allow these behaviors in your home. This is your home. When we look at the prodigal son account, one of the things that we see very clearly is when everything goes down with the prodigal son, the father knows full well what the son is asking for. The son comes in, I want my inheritance. Okay, that was one of the highest disrespects you could give in those days, to ask for your inheritance early. Okay, so he comes before his father in absolute disrespect. If he is that willing and that brazen and that sinful up front, don't you think the father knew exactly what he was going to do with that inheritance? I do. I am fully convinced when the father gave him the inheritance, he knew that son was going to go live a very sinful life. But the very fascinating thing is, where did the son go to live his sinful life? In a faraway country. The father was so intolerant of sin, his son couldn't even stay within his area. This father would have been a sheik, would be the Middle Eastern term that would be used. He would have been a ruler, kind of like Abraham, how Abraham was this ruling, like Job, how Job was this great, rich, wealthy man who had all these people underneath him. That's what this father is. And he was so well known within the area, his son knew that if he was going to go live a sinful life, it better be so far away that he couldn't tarnish the Father's name, because the Father doesn't tolerate sin in his presence. Okay, that's how God is with us. He doesn't tolerate sin in his presence. That is exactly,
And his presence is everywhere.
his presence is everywhere. But that was one of the things I never could understand with my family growing up. Why do you tolerate this? Why do you allow this to continue to happen? I mean, and here's the other thing. The Father's waiting for the Son to come home. He's waiting, watching. He's always watching. Did he ever once go say, you know, my son's living a sinful life. I need to go pull him out of that pig pen, and I need to bring him home? Does God bring the prodigal son home?
Nope.
Never. That's not even a thought that crosses the Father's mind. Because I can tell you, from enduring the discipline of the Lord, you have to hit rock bottom, and you have to decide that you're going to come back to God, because we can't force people to come back to God. God can't force people to come back. Like, that's even outside of God, because he created free moral agents. God can't even force people to come back. So when we deal with parenting, we can't force our children out of sinful situations. My children are very much aware. We are training them now. Okay, if you get in trouble and you're ready to repent and you're ready to change, absolutely, we are there for you. If you get in trouble and you aren't ready to repent, don't call us. If you want to live within my home, you will abide by my rules. This is what God has blessed me with. You will not take God's blessings and mock them and scorn them by scorning God in our house with the blessings he's given us. If you want God's blessings, you will obey God in our house. Otherwise, you can go. You can be that prodigal son, and you can leave and go far away, and you can live that sinful life. And if you die in sin, my heart breaks for you for many, many reasons. But I can't change that. And that's how we're bringing them up now. And we have failed to do that within the church. We have lost many youth within our church, young people my age, because we didn't do that. We did not discipline our children. We loved them right into hell, which is exactly what has happened with my brother. My family has loved him straight into hell, and he has no desire to change. And we cannot do that with our children. We cannot allow this earthly love to supersede how God defines love. And so as we look at God, he's upright, he's just, he is rich in giving blessings, he is compassionate. When the son comes back, he falls upon the son. He restores everything. But the son had to choose. And if we aren't disciplining our children, if we're not training them to do this, then they'll never come back. And it really does take an earth. I mean, it oftentimes earth shattering. Like, your world is totally rocked. Ours was. We were sitting in the pew, as a matter of fact. We were there every time the doors were open, and we completely fell away from God. So sitting in the building doesn't mean anything. We didn't study. We did not know. We didn't realize. We never had it instilled within us that we had to personally study God's word for us to be able to grow and to cultivate and to develop that relationship. Because as my friend says, Aaron Sprouse says, if you aren't growing, you're already dead. That's what, like, growth is required. And if there's no growth, it's death. You're not starting to die, you're already dead. And that wasn't trained, that wasn't taught, that wasn't anything. And so when Dale and I hit rock bottom, I kid you not, like, ugly rock bottom.
It was a rough rock bottom.
It was a very rough rock bottom. But the church was there for us when we repented, when we were ready to come back, when we realized that we couldn't live this life, and we repented. the church was there, and the church, if it wasn't for the church, we would not be where we're at today, because they have been that support system for us. But we have to let our kids fail, and we have to let them understand that when they fail, they have to choose to come back to God. They have to choose God's blessings, and we have to not give them those blessings if they're not going to come back to God. And that's a huge soapbox for me. But I'm telling you, because here's the thing, it's not only my brother that's lost, it's his 4 kids that are lost.
Well, I think we've all got families.
And for me, knowing what my family was capable of and what they knew, that's what makes me angry. These weren't your regular pew sitters, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, these weren't people who, like, you know, like they studied, like he was an elder. He knew this, and he still behaved in such a way that my brother and his family is lost. Which, if we can't reach my nieces and nephews, that means my great nieces and nephews are lost, which means
But then again, you can't.
I can't. All we can do is be the example. We try really hard to be that example, but there's a reason we live 7 hours away from our family, because both sides of the family struggle with what we've committed to. And Dale's family is still denominational, and my brother is still atheist. And so because of that, being at home is not a good situation for us. It is. We would love to be much closer to home, but like Dale's uncle is a denominational preacher. And so he has another sister who is she is an elder in her denomination. So we have a lot of issues. We can't have, when we try to have conversation, because everything in our life revolves around God. Like the simplest of conversations, it's like we bring God into everything. That's when you rise up, when you lay down, when you walk by the way, when when you sit down to eat, like everything. And so when we do that within the family environment, it's not pretty. So it's easier for us to live 7 hours away and not be a part of that. So
What all you just said still falls within what I was thinking. And my comment about, it's Matthew 19. Look at you. Grown-ups do not stand between a child and God.
that's right. Grown-ups don't be the hindrance.
Don't get up on Sunday morning and say, well, we're going to the lake today. We're going to a movie. You're in a ball team, you're going to go play ball today. Now that happens around this area quite a bit. We have the lakes and the
river.
Fall season,
and these were disciples that stood between Jesus and the children.
They were his disciples that stood there.
So that that falls right in your story.
Yeah.
Or what you just said. So that I guess I just found that interesting. And I thought about that, don't stand in the way of don't stand between a child and God. Don't stand between anybody
And God. There are passages that, Romans talks about, don't be the stumbling block for your brother.
I guess I've never really got that until I was doing this particular question 8.
It's sometimes hard to understand the stumbling block thing, and it's easy to understand it in some ways more than others. So my other grandmother was also a member of the church, and I remember visiting her one time, and she talked about, as far as I know, she didn't approve of alcohol consumption, period. But she did, we were talking one time, and she was saying that even if you drank, you should never offer someone alcohol in your home because you don't know what demons they're fighting. You don't know if they're a recovering alcoholic. You don't know what they witnessed. Maybe they grew up with an alcoholic, and offering them something to drink takes them back to a very bad place. And so that was my first exposure to the stumbling block idea. For me, one of my other soapbox in our culture is modesty. And I can't tell you and I'm going to say here in the pews, but I mean in the pews in general, I can't tell you how many times we've gone to worship services and I've looked at women and gone, what you wearing? I'm like, you got so much hanging out that no man can. I don't.
This is, I would say, 30 to 14 years ago. And I looked at my husband, I said, are those teenagers or are they?
Yes.
I mean, it was like.
We were the other day at we went to the ball game up here the other day, and I don't even remember who they played, but the visitors girls ball team had V-cut, their jerseys were V-cut, and when they bent over, you could see down, and I'm like, I don't want Garrett at this ball game. There ain't my son's got no business being at this ball game watching these girls. Are you kidding me? I was mad the whole time we were there. I wanted to leave. I was like, this is totally inappropriate. And you know, and things I've learned over the years in terms of I was a competitive cheerleader in high school. That was my sport. That was my thing. I lived it. I can look back now and be totally ashamed of a young man I was trying to bring to Christ. And I knew every immodest thought I planted in his head while I was out there on the court or on the football field as a cheerleader. He had the gall to tell me every immodest thought I planted in his head. And I look back now and I'm thinking, man, what a stumbling block. How dare I? And I see young ladies and they don't get it. I see the young ladies who are on the cheer squads in the youth group, and I'm going, let me tell you, ladies, you have to consider what you're doing, because it's not okay to do this to our young boys. And I see our grown women doing it. You know, I see the low cut shirts. I see the tight bottoms. I see it. And I'm like, this is not okay.
And the high shirts.
And the high shirts, yeah.
I
So-
can see some of you on those things they wear now.
Leggings.
I was watching them jog, the medical mile, and I'm like, y'all need to put that away.
Yes.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're exercising, I can understand.
Oh, you
wearing
go to
certain-
Walmart and see that. I mean,
You see less. I see wearing certain clothing because you don't want to hinder your movement,
So here's the thing.
but not.
That's the catch.
You know,
Are we ever allowed? Are there ever reasons that we are told that, well, sure, you can break God's commandment because of this situation?
well, I meant like wear that like in your own home.
Yeah.
Where you're not out in public. Where
Yes.
everybody's-
Well, exactly. But even in,
it's, like,
I wear
not
leggings
hinder
for yoga in
movement, so
the
you don't get
morning.
Yeah. I agree. Okay. And at home, when I'm exercising in the morning, if I'm wearing my yoga pants,
Yeah,
I have on basketball shorts on over them. So while I'm stretching and doing all my different things, if Garrett comes in, and they're depending on what exercise video I'm doing, Garrett's not allowed in the living room because the people on TV aren't dressed modestly. But Cindy Colley likes to talk about, we have this idea in our culture. Swimming is just like pancakes. Just add water and immodesty is okay. You're making pancake batter and you just add water and you got pancakes, it's all good. So we make these excuses of, well, it's okay for this sport, or it's okay to go to the lake, or it's okay to do these things. Now, I agree. If you're going to wear that, then it needs to be in your own home. Dale's sister is totally into fitness and everything. And she's like, you need to come to the gym. And I'm like, I ain't walking into that gym. I ain't looking at that. I don't want to see any of that. It's completely immodest. So we can't ever make exceptions to the rules. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't bow down and worship the golden statue of Nebuchadnezzar. They would rather die. Daniel didn't quit praying to Jehovah God for that time period. He chose, ignore the fact that he was supposed to pray to Darius. He would rather die. We can't break God's rules because we think it's okay in these circumstances. And that's what we've taught. And so we create stumbling blocks. So, all right, we will be done for tonight. We'll start with question 10 next time. We had lots of wonderful discussions.
I'm a talker.
No, that's fine. I love
When is next time?
next Thursday. We meet every Thursday at 6:30, unless there's
Every week.
every week. Yep.
I'll be prepared for class. It's been wonderful to hear you. I
Thank you.
love it.
Thank you.
You're great.
But yep, we meet every Thursday at 6:30, and sometimes it's shorter and sometimes it's longer. You never know. We get on large class discussions and we just
That's
keep right on
great.
going.
That's great. I love it, and I'll be here Thursday.
Sounds great. We'll see you later, Miss Shirley.
All right. Love you.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye, Lyra. Good to see you.